Hi guys, Chilifreak here, and welcome to PoeTential, the Path of Exile guide series to help you reach your goals with your build. In this brand new series, I am joined with none other than the creator of the AFK Gone Cheap and AFK Gone Meta build. Say hello to Crisped.
Hello. Alright guys, so I'm gonna be with Mr. Chilifreak in this episode, and hopefully I'm gonna be with him in the upcoming episodes as well.
Right, so let me start off by explaining what is this series all about. Well, as the name suggests, it's all about helping inexperienced players reaching their maximum potential. So Path of Exile has a lot of complex game mechanics that aren't very well explained. And for new players who come into this game and try out one of the popular builds, they might not always be met with what they're expecting. And for us veterans who know most of the crooks and corners of this game, we can usually explain why, but we seldom do. And that's why we're making this series, to share more of our knowledge that we've accumulated over the years with the player base that are struggling, so that you can enjoy this game even more than you already do. So how will this work exactly? Well, every episode will feature one popular build with a specific goal in mind. And thanks to our friend, Dirk the Great, who shared his build with us, we have something for the pilot episode. His build is an Ethereal Knives Panova Pathfinder, and his goal is to kill the Minotaur deathless and be able to farm him. So we'll start off by looking at footage of an attempt at the boss fight, and then we'll look at gear and skill tree and continuously evaluate what is being done right and what can be improved. Of course, it goes without saying that any opinions we have are not final. If there is something you disagree with or think we should have mentioned, any thoughts on the matter are welcome in the comments section of this video. A healthy discussion is only helpful. And since this series is dependent on you guys sending us your footage, before we get started, I just want to briefly mention how you will go about that. So it's very simple. Send us an email at PoeTential@outlook.com. The mail must include in the following order: your goal in one sentence, a link to a YouTube video of your game footage connected to your goal. For example, if you want to easily run Eberlab, then send us footage of your lab run. The video should also include any potential map mods. Finally, send us your account name and character name, and don't forget to set your character profile to public. Alright, so with that said, let's get started and take a look at the video.
Alright, so here is the map Dirk the Great is gonna run. And it's a Maze of a Minotaur map, and this is the boss who wants to kill a Deathless. We can just look quickly at the mods over here. So, you know, the first three mods aren't, the first two mods aren't really problematic. Problematic here is that they have more chaos resistant, and what we know and you don't is that it's pretty dependent on poison damage and chaos damage. But it's not a dangerous mod in terms of survivability. What's probably more problematic is that the player cannot regenerate mana here. Because Ethereal Knives uses a lot of mana, and for him to leech, he will need a Minotaur or some other leech mechanics. So it's gonna be pretty exciting. So we're gonna start off the video here. And we're probably gonna fast forward just a bit. So here we just fast forward into the clip, and we're seeing him clearing a bit, and he's having some problem with the mana we discussed above. He's probably emptied his whole mana pool, and yeah.
Yeah, it's totally empty.
Yeah, so he's gonna solve this in some kind of way. Yeah, yeah, I think this is a pretty funny part of the video. Funny that I came here to hear. So he's gonna put in a mana flask to get his mana back. Yeah, because he ran out of mana, and you know, how does he get flash charges? He gotta kill stuff to get his flash charges. But luckily he's a Pathfinder, so he just has to wait for a couple of seconds and he gets his flash charges up, and he can use the mana pots. Yeah, and now he got his mana back.
Yeah. Now we can start killing things again.
So the first take-home message here is prepare for your mods. He knew that mana was gonna be a problem, and he doesn't want to waste TPs on an important boss fight like this. So he should have prepped with a mana flask, actually, before running the map. Yeah, we're gonna fast forward a bit further. and try to come as close as we can to the boss fight. I assume that we won't keep the mana flask to the boss fight because it will reduce his damage heavily, but we'll see. Alright, so this is right before the boss fight. He has gotten all his flasks up and he's using a mana flask. What we need to think about here is how we will keep his mana up, since the map mod is no region. He has a mana flask, he has his Vinctors, which he also can leech with, and he seems to have a Warlord's Mark Blasphemy set up, which should also help him leech his mana up. But he's also using one of his valuable flask setup spots with a mana flask instead of Witchfire Brew, and this will reduce his damage heavily. So I don't think this map was the dream for him to do, but he should be able to manage anyways. Alright, so I think we should just start the boss fight and see how we will go about. So here we start it. Alright, so he's loading up his power charges and he seems to be going in here. And he places his Wither Totem, which is all correct, and he goes ham. And he puts out his Vaal haste, and then his pots are out. And he needs to do something about it.
Since
okay,
the Pathfinder, he can wait, but he decides to go out. Okay.
Yeah, but I think it's the right decision because he only has use for maybe, I don't know, 6 seconds. So he really has to burst, get into the TP, and then burst again and get into the TP. The issue here is that he has to get his power charges up again because he's heavily power charge dependent with his build. He actually runs dual void batteries. Alright, here he changes his Witchfire Brew. Yeah, so that I think that's gonna be a big problem for him. Also, he's manually casting a TP, and that takes a lot of time, which leaves him vulnerable for Minotaur attacks. So we're gonna see here. Hopefully he'll enter now, or I'm gonna fast forward a bit. Yeah, he enters back. So now he's gonna need to get his TP up. Yeah, and
he got some power charges.
Yeah, and also he avoided the Minotaur, which is a good thing. He saw him burrowing down, diving, which means he gotta avoid it. He saw it again, and he did the same thing. Good with a totem, I really like that. And he's used his Vinctors for 2 more seconds, and he starts to move, which is a wrong decision. When he has his flasks up, he really needs to burst all he can.
And he got hit by the slow there.
Yeah, so that's and here we gotta get out right away. He can't really do anything. His flasks are out. He needs 53 charges. Yeah, and he died there. So a take-home message there is: when your flasks are out, you need 53 charges. When they are out, you're out. I assume that the Atzir's Promise isn't enough leech for you, so when your flasks are out, when your Vinctor is out, you need to get the hell out of there right away. For some reason he was stalling, and yeah, that is a really bad start.
He warped right into the slow.
Yeah, he didn't use his Vinctors, which is a good thing, but he really needs to prepare for going ham, which he's doing right now. Yeah, and then he goes ham.
But he hasn't placed his Wither Totem.
Yeah, he has actually placed his Wither Totem, but it was right inside the falling stone circle.
Oh.
So he got killed right away. Yeah, there the Minotaur dives at him, which kills him right away, really. What I think is going on here is that he's getting... There are a lot of mechanics going on at the same time, which can confuse you, and when you're in a stress situation, you do wrong decisions, like the lightning warp in the beginning, right into the lightning.
Yeah, these mistakes that we're pointing out, it's something that we do as well. It's
yeah.
This is just to help us all improve, basically.
Yeah, so here he goes ham again.
But this time he gets really nice burst damage. He's using the time he has with his Vinctor. But he forgot to place his Wither Totem, right?
Yeah, but it was because his start was such bad. Also interesting here is that he hasn't cast his Warlord's Mark, which made him run out of mana. So I think the stress in this situation, yeah, he still isn't running the Warlord's Mark. So when the Victors is out, yeah, oh no.
Yeah, that was a wasted TP.
Yeah.
He accomplished nothing there.
And that wasn't really because of what the enemy did, it was just...
stress.
Yeah, the same thing here, the Warlord's Mark isn't casted, and I don't know why. It's just... yeah.
Okay. So now maybe he can
now
do
he's
damage.
Going burst, and he really needs to get the Minotaur down. And he succeeds. Just barely, but he succeeds. Alright, so I think we're gonna stop the clip right here and discuss a couple of things. So as we just mentioned, since his leech is heavily dependent on his Victors, he isn't even using his Warlord's Mark at times. Because it's so heavily dependent on Victors, he gotta have a plan of what to do during the battle. He just can't go in and do whatever he likes and hope for the best. That's not gonna make him do deathless runs. Of course, it's gonna take some practice to do deathless runs, but you also need to have some planning before you go in. What we can say is when he has his Victors up, he is very tanky and he doesn't die. So he really needs to face tank him when he's using his Victors. He can't cast some, then move some, then cast some. He needs to utilize all of the time he has with his Victor, which is about 6 seconds in this clip, I think. Then secondly, he's doing some mistakes like lightning warping into the lightning. I think that happened like 2 times, and it putting in some really dangerous situations.
A better alternative might be to use, for example, Flame Dash, which isn't affected by the movement speed. And you have a much faster cast time. It will be much easier to maneuver around the shockwaves, for example, which he got hit by more times than was needed.
Yeah, those electrical fields that slows him down. You know, the Pathfinder actually has anti-chill and anti-shock and anti-freeze and everything when using the flasks. But these lightning seem to affect him anyways. He gets slowed when he passes through them, even though he has immunity. So he really needs to avoid those. Lightning warping over them makes the lightning not hit them. But the lightning warp is slow, and when you're doing it at long distances, it's a very dangerous skill to use. That's why Flame Dash would be better, I think, as well. Yeah, so I think those are one of the most important things. I think one thing we're gonna discuss more later as well is the Wither Totem, because we haven't showed you the gear and everything. We're gonna go through everything there, but this build is very poison and chaos damage dependent, and you saw that the map mod had some chaos resist in it. So the Wither Totem is extremely important to make the burst damage higher. And that's where the planning goes in as well. He needs to have a structure of when he enters the boss room, what he will do. How will he get his power charges up? Where will he place the Wither Totem? And when will he go ham? So I think a plan of that would be a very good start. And then the thing about Lightning Warp would help him a lot. And maybe use his Blasphemy Warlord's Mark so he doesn't run out of mana the second his Victor is out, because sometimes we're unlucky and it's good to at least have some margins. Alright, do you have something more to comment about the video clip?
I don't think so. I just want to say that, to be fair, it was clear that he was under a lot of stress there, and this was a fight he barely made it through. But I agree with you, Crispy. I think that more planning and, in fact, just more experience with the boss will help him be able to do it without any problem, because this is a really powerful build. Taking on the Minotaur isn't really a problem.
Yeah, and there are some in-depth videos I think made by what is it called? Engineering Eternity.
Yeah.
There are also some clips made by I don't really know the name, but he's playing Kinetic Blast Wander, who also made some good guides on the boss fights. But really, in this fight, what killed him most from the Minotaur was the diving attacks, which Minotaur does. So when Minotaur is on a long distance, he dives under the ground and makes a burrow attack, as we call it. And it hits like, I think, 2 times or something. It basically did enough damage to kill him with his... Does it have 8,000 energy shield or something like that?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
8 or 9,000.
Yeah. So, yeah, it is. It doesn't show here, which I think you all should show in your clips, because it's healthy to see you how much health or energy shield you have. But I think he has around 8k energy shield. All right.
I think we can move on to the gear and skill tree right now.
All right. So what I'd like to do here is to go through the tree to start with. Yeah. So what we talked about earlier is that he's a Ethereal Knives Nova builds, and this is possible because he has a jewel which makes this possible. It's the Ring of Blades jewel, and it makes his Ethereal Knives fire in a Nova, which is very nice for clearing maps and stuff like that, but it doesn't really affect the boss fights. And this is basically what this map is about. It's about the boss fight. All right, he's a ranger and he's a Pathfinder. So here we see the Pathfinder tree. What is taken is a Master Alchemist node, which makes him immune to status alignments, which is very nice because we spoke earlier that he uses Vinctars and it makes him immune to the shock downside of the Vinctars. He also gains flasks every 3 seconds thanks to Nature's Boom, and he has Master Herbalist, which is really the core of his build, I think, because it gives him poison on hit while using a flask, and then some poison damage nodes. So this is what enables his chaos and physical damage to poison. Then he also uses Veteran Boyer, which I think he doesn't use it for the elemental aspect. He mostly uses because if he puts elemental status alignment, he will get 100% increased flash charges, which is nice. Alright, enough about that. In the tree, he has mostly spec'd into chaos nodes, as we see over here and here. And here, he has a lot of crit, like spell crit and stuff like that. He also has some power charges.
And energy shield, of course.
Yeah, I would say that's about it. And some crit multi. I'd like to go over to the items. I'd like to just mention that you can import his build or any other build we'll mention in the series by going into import export build, and you write in
his account name, which is Derp the Great, and his character name is Snurkniv, which you can see
and you
here.
choose that later on. And then you can just click on Passive Tree and Jewels and Item and Skills to import them. He uses dual Void Batteries, and Void Batteries are very interesting because they deliver an enormous amount of damage. You see they have a cast speed roll, we have spell damage per power charge. And he is heavily invested into power charges. I think he had 8 power charges, which gives him a bonus of 200% increased spell damage, minus the reduction effect of 80 plus 40. So yeah, about 160 spell damage is what those give each. Very powerful. Yeah, and then he has some energy shield gear, I guess. He has Voidwalker boots, which are essentially for having pierce on his Ethereal Knives for better clear speed. He uses an amulet, which gives him yeah, some frenzy and power charges when he kills, and some increased projectile speed and stuff like that. It's a good amulet for clearing maps. Then he has some random rings and a crystal belt for some energy shield. And then comes his flask, which are Witchfire Brew to get some more poison effect there. As just promised, for some more chaos damage and some leech. Since Rebirth for some even more chaos damage. And then we have the Vinctus to get him some leech, basically, and to shock. And then we have an Overflowing Chalice for more flash charges and actually some increased damage. Alright, so now we've mentioned the gear. What I'd like to discuss before I get into the damage part of his build is stun immunity. Because since he's a energy shield build, he uses Chaos Inculation. And when you're energy shield build, you're pretty vulnerable to stuns, basically. And you need some sort of protection against that. And we didn't see really a unique item that protects him against him. He has also not taken Unwavering Stance. That's a long travel distance, so it's not worth it for his build. And then we wonder, how doesn't he get too much stunned? Well, on his boots, he has a 80% chance to avoid being stunned if you've killed recently. And this is fine when he's clearing a map, as you'd think, because he kills mobs all the time and he doesn't get stunned thanks to that. But when he gets into a boss fight, there will be long periods when he hasn't killed any mob. So this mod won't help him at all. And since he doesn't kill mobs in a long time, his amulet won't help him either.
Although for the Minotaur, since he spawns those stone golems, he will actually get that boost. But there are lots of bosses that doesn't spawn minions, and that's where the effect won't count.
Yeah, but also on the Minotaur, these minions don't come all the time. It's not reliable, so you don't have a reliable stun immunity. You don't have a reliable charge generating.
And so, I believe recently is the latest 4 seconds, or is it 8 seconds?
Yeah, it's the latest 4 seconds.
Yeah.
So it's a very short period of time. So I would really recommend for those kind of fights to prepare. And in his case, preparing would mean getting stun immunity.
And Eye of Ka'ula would be a perfect example.
Yeah, because he could just replace his amulet. So here we have Eye of Ka'ula, it gives stun immunity, as simple as that. And he wouldn't lose anything essential. Some other builds can use like Valerium to get permanent stun immunity, and there are some other items as well. Yeah, so I think that is a very important take-home message. We didn't see him getting too much stunned, but I think why he moved around a bit when he was going full ham was because he hadn't killed recently. He was maybe scared of getting stunned and killed. So that's always a risk, and you can't go deathless in many runs if you don't have stun immunity. It's kind of important. All right. Also, I'd like to mention a Vaal skill, because Flask were very important for him, and he had a persistent problem with gaining power charges after he TP'd out. There is a solution that lets him keep his flash charges for a longer period of time, and I don't think many use this skill, but it's really very nice to use. And it's called Vaal Breach. And what it enables you to do is to cast a Vaal Breach. A breach, really, which doesn't give you any items and stuff like that, but you gain on kill effects and you gain charges. And it lasts for a long time. So maybe instead of just using Vinctors 1 time, he could maybe use it 3 times in one run. And he isn't limited to only using 1 Vaal Breach. In his inventory, he can have 2 Vaal Breaches, he can have 3 Vaal Breaches. So what this skill makes it possible to do is to kill the Minotaur in 1 run. And these deaths that we saw wouldn't occur, because he would kill him on the first run. He wouldn't lose his power charges, he wouldn't lose anything. And he wouldn't
Exactly.
really needed to switch his gear at all. The kill-on effects would still work.
And one thing that I thought about is that this would also spawn minions, which would mean that he could actually gain the stun immunity from his boots.
Yeah. So his amulet would still work and his boots. So it's really very nice. What is the real downside of his skill is, if you watch closely here, is the cast time. It's 2.5 seconds. And that's very dangerous. We talked about that that he was stupid cast his TP as he did, because if you have it in your inventory and right click on it instead, it's instant. Well, Vaal Breach is the same thing. It's very dangerous to cast because it takes a long time. So if I would use Vaal Breach, I would link it to faster casting. And I would try to get some quality on the skill. If that's possible. Maybe they run very expensive, but yeah. Because it's very dangerous. And the quality is very powerful. 20% quality would give 60% increased cast speed. It's a powerful mod. Alright, so Vaal Breach take-home message there is that for on-kill effect builds like this is very heavily dependent on kill, and it's heavily dependent on having power charges on the boss fight, then Vaal Breach is very, very nice to use. I've used it in several builds and it's powerful. It doesn't pose any risk in you know, the monsters in it won't kill you because you have Vaal's Pact and everything. So it's just, you will have insane amount of leeches and you will get a lot of fast charges. Alright. Now I'd like to go over damage, because you might think that it has a lot of damage. He's a double dipping poison build. He should be doing a lot of damage, right? Let's look into that. So in the path of building, you can choose which skill you'd like to use. And here we have Ethereal Knives. And you can go into configuration. We've also turned on power charges, and he has the enemy shocked. And in the items, we've turned all his fire flasks on. And what we can see on a normal mob is that, including his poison, he's doing 1.4 million damage per second. Now Minotaur is having around, I would guess around 10-15 million HP. Let's say 15 million. This should be able to kill him in 10 seconds. Without any wither stacks, without anything. If you go into configuration, we can actually turn on if the mob is a boss. And it is a Shaper or Guardian. So we turn that on. Whoops. The poison damage and the total damage including poison goes down rapidly. So it goes down from over a million to only 600,000. And that's not a lot. And that would mean that the boss fight would now take around 20 seconds. Alright? But then, if you think about the map mods, it had another 25 chaos resist, right? I think the Guardian has like... So if we turn up the enemy chaos resistance to 25, now his damage is already down at 400k. And now the boss fight will take 30 seconds, and when you think about it, his Vingtars only last for 6 seconds. Okay? His Vingtar only lasts for 6 seconds. So if it takes 30 seconds to take the boss down, he will need to use 5 TPs. Unless he uses something like Vaal Breach. And we don't want to use 5 TPs on every boss fight. That is not good preparation, because if we fail with some things and we lose 2 TPs because we did something wrong, then we might not even succeed to kill the boss at all. We're talking about doing it deathless, but here we won't even succeed killing the Minotaur.
Exactly. We need more margins.
Yeah, and that's where the Wither comes in. We talked about that his wither totems got destroyed and maybe he didn't use his wither enough. And he really needs to make sure that he uses the wither fully, because we're gonna see what wither is gonna do. We'll go over to his skill wither, if we can find, yeah, there's wither. And right now we have 1 stack, but let's say, since it's cast every 6 per second, and you can link increased duration to it and faster casting, with increased duration, the duration will be over 3 seconds. So what you can do is to max stack it. You can get 20 stacks. Because almost after 2 seconds it will be max stacked. So at 20 stacks it's gonna bring down the enemy's resistance by a lot, chaos resist. So we're gonna go back to the Ethereal knives now, and we're gonna see what damage it does. Alright, so with full stacks we're essentially doubling the DPS output on these kind of mobs.
This is the power of double dipping.
Yeah, I don't know if we actually calculate fully for it, but it's very powerful, the wither stacking. And now he makes 800,000 instead of 400,000. The boss fights only last for 15 seconds of total ham, and he should be able to do it in 3 flask charge usages. Which is possible if he uses 1 Vaal Breach or maybe 2 Vaal Breaches. So he might not even need to use his TPs, which would make his life an awful lot easier. Alright. So that's the damage part. We've talked about some practical stuff like using Flame Dash instead of Lightning Warp. We've talked about the Vaal Breach and the Wither Totem. And I think that's the take-home message. Of course, there are different ways of doing these builds. You could tell him to go low life, you could tell him to change his build completely, but he's made a build and we want to make the changes based on the way he wants to play the game. So with his current build, these are the things he could do to make his life an awful lot easier. Yeah, what do you think, Chilifreak?
I think this these are some really good points, and just keep in mind that you'll get better as you farm this boss more and more often. It's experience means a lot. I mean, and you watch people like Mathil, for example. I wouldn't be surprised if you can kill Shaper with default attack, because these players, they've done the bosses hundreds of times, so a lot of it just simply lies in experience. And that will also reduce the amount of stress you'll suffer when you counter these bosses. So I'm certain that you'll be able to reach your goal eventually. And these tips that Crispy has offered, I think, will be a huge step towards improving your performance with this boss.
Yeah.
So I have nothing to add. I think you've summed it all up really great.
Yeah, doing deathless boss fights is very, very hard at the first time. Even if you have a perfect build, you've copied the gear right off a build guide, thinking you're doing everything right, you've watched the clips and everything, you think you have a fast reaction time, you'll be surprised that you'll get random killed by a lot of things. So getting deathless will take a lot of tries, and is something you'll get better at and better at with time. And the more you play the game, the better you'll get.
Alright, so with that, I'm going to end this episode. This was the first episode of our brand new series, PoeTential. And before we end, I just want to briefly go over again how you do to send in your footage and potentially be featured in one of these videos. So what you do is send us an email at PoeTential@outlook.com. The mail must include in the following order: your goal in 1 sentence, a link to a YouTube video of your game footage connected to your goal, and it should also include any potential map mods. Finally, your account name and character name, and don't forget to set your character profile to public. I cannot stress this enough, because otherwise we cannot go into Path of Building like we've done here and get access to all of this lovely information that we've been able to analyze. So I think we're ready to end this video. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for all your support to this channel. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Until next time, guys.